That morning, my husband smiled and made me breakfast with his own hands. Everyone would call it love, but my heart felt heavy. I couldn't explain it. Something felt wrong. So I did the one thing that saved my life. I didn't eat it. I gave that breakfast to his secretary instead. An hour later, the office echoed with screams. And that's when I realized the breakfast was never meant for her. It was meant for me. I never imagined that a single breakfast could nearly cost me my life. That morning started like any other. I arrived at the office early, as usual, the city still half asleep behind the floor-to-ceiling windows of my executive office. Sunlight spilled across my desk, highlighting stacks of reports waiting to be reviewed. I had just settled into my chair when the door opened without a knock. Trevante walked in. My husband, the company's CEO, the man who had barely looked at me for months. In his hands was a sleek, pale blue thermal food container. Expensive, unfamiliar, and completely out of place. What shocked me more than the container was his expression. He was smiling, not the polite corporate smile he used in meetings, but something warmer, almost intimate, a smile I hadn't seen since the early days of our marriage. "Good morning," he said softly. "Happy third anniversary." I froze. Before I could respond, he set the container gently on my desk, like it held something precious. "I wanted to do something special for you today." Trevante never did special. He twisted open the lid and a thick cloud of steam escaped into the room, carrying with it a heavy, spicy smell. "I noticed you've been looking pale lately. Work's been stressing you out, so I got up before dawn and made this myself, slow cooked, just the way you like it." Chitterlings. Once upon a time, that dish would have made me emotional. It used to be my comfort food, but now the smell hit me like a punch to the stomach because I was 3 months pregnant and no one knew. Morning sickness had been torturing me for weeks. Strong smells made my stomach twist violently, and that moment was no different. I swallowed hard, forcing my face to remain calm while nausea burned my throat. "Thank you," I said carefully. "That's very thoughtful, but I already ate at home. I'm still full." For just a second, something flickered across his face. Surprise? Maybe irritation? Then it vanished. "That won't give you energy," he said, pushing the container closer. "I worked hard on this. At least try a little." His voice was gentle, but there was pressure beneath it. Invisible, heavy. I looked into his eyes, searching for concern, affection, anything real. What I found instead was expectation, calculation. Before I could respond, there was a knock. The door opened, and Keisha walked in, the new secretary hired 3 months ago. Young, beautiful, confident in a way that bordered on provocative. Her tight dress and perfectly styled hair didn't go unnoticed. She glanced at the container and laughed lightly. "Wow, Director Trevante, that's so sweet, cooking for his wife himself. Zanaya, you're so lucky. With a husband like that, no one stands a chance." Trevante didn't even look at her. He gave me a few brief instructions about a meeting and walked out, leaving the container behind. That was when an idea formed. I smiled and gently slid the container toward Keisha. "I really can't eat it, and it would be a shame to waste his effort. Have you had breakfast?" Her eyes lit up. "Are you serious?" "Of course," I said. "He makes it really well." She didn't hesitate. Hugging the container to her chest like a prize, she thanked me repeatedly before leaving. The moment the door closed, relief washed over me. I didn't know then that I had just avoided death. An hour later, a scream ripped through the office floor, sharp, desperate, filled with terror. And when I ran outside to see what happened, my entire world began to collapse. I stood frozen, staring at the blood spreading across the office floor, when a terrifying thought struck me. That breakfast was never meant for her. It was meant for me. The scream echoed through the corridor like a siren from hell. I dropped everything and ran. Employees poured out of their offices, panic spreading faster than sound. Papers scattered across the floor, chairs toppled over, and somewhere ahead of me someone was crying hysterically. My heart slammed against my ribs as a terrible sense of dread crawled up my spine. When I reached the open workspace, my legs almost gave out. Keisha was on the floor. Her body twisted unnaturally beside her desk, hands clutching her stomach as if something inside her was tearing her apart. The thermal food container lay overturned nearby, its contents splattered across the carpet. The thick smell of the stew mixed with something sour and metallic, making the air unbearable. "Keisha!" someone screamed. She convulsed violently, foam forming at the corners of her mouth. Her face, once flawless and confident, was drained of all color, her eyes rolling back as her body shook uncontrollably. But that wasn't what froze my blood. A dark red stain was spreading beneath her. Blood. Fresh, horrifyingly real blood soaked into the office carpet, blooming outward like a nightmare. People backed away in shock. Someone shouted to call an ambulance. Others stood paralyzed, phones trembling in their hands. My stomach dropped. That breakfast, the bowl of food, a sickening realization slammed into me so hard I nearly collapsed. If I hadn't been nauseous, if I hadn't pushed that container away, that would have been me on the floor, and my baby. Before I could process the thought, the CEO's door flew open. Trevante ran out. His face was pale, eyes wide, not with concern, but with raw panic. He didn't rush to help Keisha. He didn't ask what had happened. Instead, his gaze locked onto the blood-stained carpet. I watched his expression shift, shock, then fear, and finally something far darker, rage. Slowly, his eyes lifted and found me. The look he gave me wasn't one of relief that his wife was safe. It wasn't the reaction of a boss worried about his employee. It was the look of a hunter realizing his prey had slipped away. Before I could step back, he crossed the distance between us and grabbed my arm, his grip crushingly tight. "What did you do? Why her? Why did you give it to her?" Pain shot through my arm, but his words hurt more. Why her? Not what happened, not is she okay, but why wasn't it you? I ripped my arm free, my voice shaking with fury and disbelief. "What are you talking about? I gave her the food you brought. What were you expecting, Trevante? That it would be me lying there instead?" His face drained of color. For a split second, I saw it, the truth flashing naked in his eyes. Then he stepped back quickly, running a hand through his hair as if trying to regain control. The wail of ambulance sirens rose from outside, cutting through the tension. Paramedics rushed in, pushing people aside. They worked quickly, lifting Keisha onto a stretcher while blood continued to seep through the fabric of her dress. Trevante followed them, but just before the elevator doors closed, he turned back toward me. His eyes were cold. "You're coming to the hospital. This happened because of that food. Don't even think about running from responsibility." The doors slid shut. I stood there, shaking, surrounded by whispers and horrified stares. The man I had loved for 3 years was suddenly a stranger. No, worse than that, a monster wearing a familiar face. At the hospital, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I sat stiffly in a plastic chair, my hands pressed protectively against my stomach. Trevante paced back and forth like a trapped animal, occasionally shooting glances filled with suspicion and hatred. Finally, the emergency room doors opened. A doctor stepped out, exhaustion etched deep into his face. Trevante rushed forward. "Is she alive?" The doctor nodded slowly. "She survived, but this was not simple food poisoning." My heart pounded. "What do you mean?" Trevante asked, his voice tight. The doctor took a breath. "She ingested a massive dose of a drug called misoprostol." Trevante staggered back. The doctor continued gravely. "It's a medication used to induce uterine contractions, often for abortion." The world tilted. And then the doctor delivered the final blow. She was 6 weeks pregnant. The fetus did not survive. As Trevante collapsed into a chair, devastated by the truth, I realized something chilling. The poison didn't just kill a pregnancy.
It exposed a secret that could destroy him forever.
The words hung in the air like a death sentence. She was 6 weeks pregnant. The fetus did not survive. For a moment, no one moved. Travante's knees buckled, and he collapsed into the plastic chair behind him, his face empty, as if his soul had been ripped straight out of his body. His mouth opened, but no sound came out, only a broken, strangled breath. So it was true. Keisha hadn't just been his secretary. She had been carrying his child. I felt no satisfaction, no triumph, only a deep, icy disgust spreading through my chest. The same man who would smile at me that morning, who had spoken softly about taking care of my health, had unknowingly killed his own unborn child with the poison meant for me. The doctor adjusted his glasses and continued, his voice firm and professional. The dosage found in her system was extremely high. This was not accidental ingestion. Travante shot up from his seat. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," the doctor replied evenly, "that this appears to be intentional poisoning. Hospital protocol requires us to notify the authorities." As if summoned by his words, 2 police officers appeared at the end of the corridor. My heart clenched. One officer approached calmly. "We need to ask both of you some questions." Travante reacted instantly. He wiped his face, straightened his suit, and slipped back into his role, the composed CEO, the respectable husband. He pointed directly at me. "Officers," he said, voice trembling with rehearsed outrage, "this morning I prepared food for my wife. She had access to it alone in her office before giving it to my secretary. I believe my wife tampered with it." The accusation hit me like a slap. I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. Jealousy, that was his angle. I took a slow breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "That's not true," I said steadily. "I never touched the food after he opened it. The security cameras will confirm that." The older officer nodded, jotting something down. "We'll review everything." Travante pressed on, desperation seeping through his polished mask. "She's been emotionally unstable lately, overworked, suspicious. I wouldn't be surprised if she acted irrationally." Every word felt like betrayal, layered on betrayal. We were separated for questioning. The officer who spoke with me was calm, almost gentle. "Ma'am, please tell me exactly what happened from the moment the container entered your office." So I did. I told him about the sudden affection, the overwhelming smell, my nausea. I explained that I had only opened the lid briefly and never touched the food again. I told him how Keisha entered, how I offered the container in front of witnesses, and how it never left my sight until she took it. Across the hall, I could hear Travante's raised voice. "I cooked it myself. No one else touched it. I took it straight from my kitchen to her office." He didn't realize he was tightening the noose around his own neck, because if he cooked it, then he was responsible for what was inside. Minutes later, the officer returned with new information. The forensics confirmed the drug was fully dissolved into the stew. That means it was added during cooking, while the food was hot, not afterward. Travante's face went gray. "No, that's impossible. Maybe Keisha took the drug herself." I couldn't stay silent any longer. "If she took it herself, how did it end up evenly mixed into the stew you cooked?" He spun toward me, eyes wild. "You hate me. You're framing me." The officer raised a hand. "Enough." He looked directly at Travante. "Your statements contradict the evidence. We'll need you to come with us for further investigation." Travante froze. Then, like a cornered animal, he lashed out. "Sanaya did this. She wants to destroy me." I looked at him, this man I had shared a bed with, trusted, defended, and felt something inside me finally die. As the officers led him away, he turned back one last time. His eyes weren't filled with regret. They were filled with fear, because he knew something I hadn't said out loud yet. I was pregnant, and if the truth came out, he wouldn't just lose his freedom, he would lose everything. As Travante disappeared down the hallway in handcuffs, I placed a trembling hand over my stomach and realized the next target of his desperation might still be me. The hallway felt colder after they took Travante away. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, harsh and unforgiving, as if exposing every lie that had been hiding in the shadows of my marriage. I sat alone on the hard plastic chair, one hand resting protectively over my stomach, the other clenched tightly in my lap. My baby was still alive. That single truth was the only thing keeping me upright. Minutes later, the older officer returned. His expression was serious, but not hostile.
Mrs. Zania, we'll need you to remain available. There are still several things to verify. I understand, I replied quietly. As he walked away, my phone vibrated. A message from my assistant, Amani. Are you okay? I pulled the building security footage like you asked. Something's wrong, very wrong. My heart skipped. I replied immediately, telling her to come to the hospital. While I waited, my mind replayed the morning over and over again. Travante's sudden kindness, the carefully chosen words, the insistence that I eat. None of it had been spontaneous. It was rehearsed, planned. And then there was one detail I couldn't ignore. He had arrived at the office an hour later than usual. Amani arrived breathless, her laptop clutched tightly against her chest. She sat beside me and opened the screen, lowering her voice. Xenia, I checked the garage and elevator cameras. She pointed to the timestamp. Travante's car entered the parking garage at 7:15 a.m. That's normal, I said. Yes, she replied, her eyes darkening. But he didn't come up to your floor until 8:15. My pulse thundered in my ears. An hour? An entire hour, she confirmed. He didn't go home, he didn't go to a meeting, he stayed inside the building. She clicked to another video. This one showed a dim emergency stairwell in the basement. A man wearing a mask and a white shirt moved quickly toward the back exit, dragging a large black trash bag. I leaned forward, my blood turning cold. That's DeAndre, I whispered. Travante's personal assistant. His cousin, his shadow. What's he doing? I asked. Amani swallowed. That footage was taken around 7:50 a.m. He avoided the main elevators and used the emergency stairs. Whoever does that doesn't want to be seen. I sat back slowly. That missing hour, that trash bag, evidence. Before I could process further, another message came in, this time from an unknown number. You should come home. We need to talk. Travante. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. The audacity, the danger. I think he knows he's losing control, which makes him unpredictable, Amani murmured. That night, I did not go home. Instead, I stayed in my office, the rain outside pounding against the windows like a warning. Around midnight, Amani returned with more information. Documents, bank records, photos. Keisha's apartment, she said quietly. It's not in her name. I frowned. What do you mean? It's registered under a shell company owned by DeAndre, and the rent plus living expenses was paid using company funds. Everything clicked. The affair, the pregnancy, the poison. Travante wasn't just cheating on me, he was protecting himself. If I divorced him while pregnant, he'd lose half of everything. The baby wasn't just unwanted, it was a threat, and he had tried to erase it. I felt a wave of rage, not from pregnancy this time, but from rage. That night I made a decision. I wouldn't confront him yet. I would let him believe I was still confused, still afraid, still blind, because men like Travante only make mistakes when they think they're winning. I texted him back, I'm at the office, I'm scared, everyone's whispering, I don't know what to do. His reply came instantly, stay there, don't think too much, I'll handle everything, trust me. I stared at the screen, my lips curling into a bitter smile. Trust him? Never again. Because tomorrow I wouldn't just protect myself, I would expose him. As Thurna rolled outside and I placed my hand over my belly, one thought burned through my mind. If Travante realized I was still pregnant, would he try again?
The next morning, I woke before dawn. Sleep had barely touched me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw blood spreading across the office floor, heard Travante's voice insisting I eat, felt his hand crushing my arm. The house was silent, but I didn't trust the silence. Silence was where danger hid. I dressed carefully, choosing calm colors, loose fabric, nothing that hinted at pregnancy. Then I looked at myself in the mirror. 3 years ago, I had loved this man enough to build my life around him. Now, I was preparing to survive him. At the office, the atmosphere was thick with tension. People whispered openly now. Rumors slithered through hallways about jealousy, affairs, poison, miscarriage. I kept my head high and walked straight to my office. Amani arrived shortly after, carrying a thin folder. I dug deeper into Keisha's background, she said quietly, locking the door behind her. In Zanaya, she knew she was pregnant. My jaw tightened. How? She visited a private OBGYN clinic 2 weeks ago, Amani continued, sliding a photo across my desk. She wasn't careless, she was strategic. The image showed Keisha entering a discreet medical building, sunglasses pulled low, posture confident. She was planning something, I murmured. Yes, Amani agreed. And Trevante knew. That explained everything. Keisha's pregnancy wasn't a surprise, it was leverage, and Trevante's solution wasn't responsibility, it was elimination. My phone buzzed. Trevante again. Baby, are you okay? The police are exaggerating everything. I'll fix it. Please don't believe the rumors. I forced myself to type back with shaking fingers. I'm just scared. I don't know who to trust anymore. A pause. Then, trust me. I'd never hurt you. I nearly laughed. A knock interrupted us. Amani stiffened. You weren't expecting anyone. No. She opened the door cautiously. DeAndre stood there. His usually confident posture was gone. Sweat beaded along his forehead, and his eyes darted nervously down the hallway. I need to talk to Miss Zanaya, he said quietly. Amani looked at me for permission. I nodded. He stepped inside and shut the door behind him, lowering his voice. Mr. Trevante asked me to give you something. He pulled a thin file from his jacket and placed it on my desk like it burned his hands. What is this? I asked coolly. It's medical paperwork, he stammered. It proves Keisha about the drug herself, yesterday afternoon. I opened the folder. Inside was a flimsy report and a receipt for Miss Oberstall. The paper was pristine, the ink too fresh. Fake. I looked up slowly. You expect me to hand this to the police? DeAndre swallowed hard. The boss says if you cooperate, this will all go away. He says it protects you, too. Protects me, I repeated softly. What it really did was set me up. If I handed this over, it would look like I was helping frame a dying woman and hiding my own involvement. Trevante wasn't just cruel. He was desperate. I slid the folder back toward him. Take this and leave. DeAndre panicked. Please, if he goes down, the company collapses. You'll lose everything. I stood up, my voice firm. I'd rather lose everything than live off blood money. He paled. Tell Trevante, I continued coldly, that forging evidence is another crime, and remind yourself that being his accomplice won't save you. DeAndre grabbed the file and fled. Amani exhaled shakily. That was close. No, I said quietly. That was confirmation. Trevante wasn't done. He was trying to erase tracks, silence witnesses, rewrite reality, which meant it was time to strike back. Amani, I said, meeting her eyes, I want call records, financial transfers, everything involving DeAndre and any unfamiliar numbers. She nodded. Already started. As she turned to leave, she paused. Zanaya, be careful. Men like him don't surrender quietly. I rested my hand over my stomach, feeling a faint flutter inside. I know, I said. That's why I won't give him another chance. As I stared at the forged receipt left behind on my desk, one thought chilled me. If Trevante was this desperate to fake evidence, what else was he hiding?
By evening, the answers began to surface. Amani returned to my office with her laptop, eyes sharp and focused, the look she wore only when she'd uncovered something big. She locked the door behind her and turned the screen toward me. I traced the call logs, she said. Trevante and DeAndre have been in constant contact with one number over the past week, especially the night before the poisoning. My heart thudded. Who does it belong to? Amani hesitated, then said, her name is Soraya. The name stirred something uncomfortable in my memory. Soraya, I repeated. Trevante's college ex, Amani explained. She's a licensed pharmacist now, works as a regional rep for a pharmaceutical company. Everything snapped into place. A pharmacist, a restricted drug, a desperate man. He couldn't buy it himself, I murmured, so he used her. Amani nodded. There's more. She clicked another file open. Grainy security footage appeared, an alley behind an office complex. The timestamp was from the afternoon before the incident. I leaned closer. DeAndre appeared on screen first, glancing around nervously. Moments later, a tall woman in sunglasses approached him. She handed him a small package wrapped in newspaper. No conversation, no hesitation, just an exchange. That's Soraya, Amani said quietly. And that package, that's the drug. My chest tightened. Trevante hadn't acted alone. He had built a chain of accomplices, each one thinking they were protected by his power. They'll all turn on each other, I said, especially when they realize he's already trying to blame them. Amani met my gaze. What do you want to do? I exhaled slowly. We don't go to the police yet. She frowned. Why not? Because Trevante is still scrambling, and desperate people make the biggest mistakes when they think they're about to win. That night, my phone rang. Trevante. I answered, keeping my voice soft. Hello? Why didn't you come home? He asked, forcing concern into his tone. You shouldn't be alone in your condition. Condition. My fingers tightened around the phone. I was scared, I said quietly. The rumors, the police. He sighed dramatically. I told you, I'll handle it. You just need to stay calm. Stress isn't good for you. Are you worried about me? I asked gently, or about the investigation. A pause. Then a laugh. What kind of question is that? Of course I'm worried about you. Liar. After hanging up, I made my next move. I sent Soraya a message from an anonymous account. We need to talk. I know what you gave DeAndre. Her reply came less than 5 minutes later. Who is this? Fear always responds quickly. I chose a discreet cafe for the meeting, quiet, upscale, and equipped with visible security cameras. When Soraya arrived, she looked exactly like I expected. Polished, confident, wearing money like armor. She sat across from me, lips curling into a faint smirk. So, the perfect wife finally wants to meet. I didn't respond. Instead, I slid my phone across the table. The screenshot froze her smile. It showed her in the alley, handing DeAndre the package. Her face drained of color. Where did you get that? She whispered. Enough, I replied calmly, to put you in prison for a very long time. She swallowed. You don't understand. Trevante told me that his wife was pregnant by another man, that he needed help to fix a problem. Her silence confirmed it. I leaned forward. He's already trying to frame Kesia, and when that fails, he'll blame you. Are you ready to go down for him? Her hands began to shake. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, she whispered. I thought it was just a pill that cured a baby and almost killed me. Her eyes widened. You, she breathed. Yes, I said. I was the target. Soraya broke. Tears streamed down her face as she reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. Everything's on here. Messages, call recordings, payment confirmations. I took it without hesitation. This is your only chance, I said firmly. You cooperate, you testify, and you might walk free. She nodded frantically. I'll do whatever you want. As I stood to leave, my phone vibrated again. Trevante. I didn't answer, because now I had his confession in my hand. As I closed my fingers around the flash drive, one truth echoed in my mind. Trevante's web was unraveling, and he had no idea how close he was to falling.
I didn't go home that night. Instead, I checked into a hotel under a different name. one with discreet security and private elevators. Paranoia wasn't fear anymore. It was survival. Trevante had lost control of the narrative, and men like him never accept that quietly. I spent the night listening to the hum of the city and the steady rhythm of my own breathing, one hand resting on my stomach, the other gripping the flash drive like a lifeline. By morning, the storm broke. The police called. "Mrs. Anaya," the detective said calmly, "new evidence has surfaced. We'd like you to come in." I was ready. At the precinct, I handed over everything. The footage, the financial trails, the flash drive from Soraya. I watched the detective's expression change as he listened to the recordings. Trevante's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. "She can't have that baby, you understand? If she does, I lose everything." The silence afterward was heavy. "That's conspiracy to commit murder," the detective said quietly, "along with obstruction of justice and misuse of controlled substances." I nodded. "I know. What we need now," he added, "is your testimony." "I'll testify," I said without hesitation, because this wasn't just about justice. It was about stopping him. By afternoon, the news broke. CEO arrested in poisoning plot scandal. The headline exploded across screens, phones, and boardrooms. Investors panicked. The board called an emergency meeting. Shares plummeted. Trevante called me. I declined. He texted, "You think you've won? You're making a huge mistake." I didn't reply. That evening, as I returned to the hotel, I noticed something wrong. The security guard at the entrance wasn't the same. My chest tightened. I turned slowly, and that's when I felt it. A hand. Rough. Desperate. My scream barely escaped before I was shoved into a maintenance corridor, the door slamming shut behind us. The smell of metal and oil burned my nose. It was DeAndre. His eyes were wild. "You ruined everything," he snarled. "Do you know what he'll do to me in prison?" I struggled, my heart pounding. "Let me go." "You should have stayed quiet," he hissed, reaching into his jacket. Time slowed. I kicked hard, my heel connecting with his knee. He stumbled, swearing. I slammed my elbow into his chest and ran, but he grabbed my coat, yanking me back. Before he could recover, a voice thundered, "Security!" Guards rushed in, weapons drawn. DeAndre froze. Within seconds, he was on the ground, cuffed and screaming. I collapsed against the wall, shaking uncontrollably. At the hospital later that night, the doctor confirmed what I'd been praying for. "The baby is fine," she said gently. "No signs of distress." Tears streamed down my face. That was when the detective arrived again. "Trevante's been officially charged, but there's something else." My heart sank. "What?" "Trevante posted bail," the detective said gravely, "and he's furious." The air felt suddenly thin. "He knows you're the key witness, which means we need to move fast." "How fast?" I asked. "Fast enough to keep you alive." That night, I was placed under protective custody. A safe house, armed guards, no windows, alone, except for one thing. A letter slid under the door. No stamp, no return address, just 3 words written in familiar handwriting. "You belong to me." My hands trembled as I crumpled the paper, because Trevante wasn't finished. He had nothing left to lose. As I stared at the threat in my hands, one terrifying thought echoed in my mind. What would a man do when power, reputation, and freedom were already gone?
Protective custody was supposed to feel safe. Instead, it felt like a cage. The safe house was quiet to the point of madness. No street noise, no windows, no clocks. Just white walls, humming air vents, and the constant awareness that danger still existed somewhere beyond the door. The letter haunted me. "You belong to me." Trevante's handwriting, controlled, confident, as if chains and charges meant nothing to him. The detective visited the next morning. He looked tired, like a man who had stopped believing in coincidences. "We traced how the letter got in," he said. "It was slipped into the outer checkpoint during a shift change." "So he still has reach," I said flatly. "Yes," he admitted.
Money buys loyalty, or silence. My stomach tightened, not from fear for myself, but for my baby. I want to move up my testimony as soon as possible. He nodded. That might provoke him. Good, I replied. Let him panic. The court hearing was scheduled for 2 days later. Until then, I waited. Then, the call came. From an unknown number. Against protocol, my phone rang anyway. Screening failure. I answered instinctively. Trevante's voice slid into my ear like poison. You look tired, Zanaya. My blood ran cold. How did you get this number? He chuckled softly. You always did underestimate how well I know you. You're violating a restraining order, I said, forcing calm. Please, he scoffed. You think paper protects you? I closed my eyes. Turn yourself in properly, Trevante. Accept what you did. Silence. Then his voice hardened. You took my future. You killed my child. The audacity stole my breath. You poisoned that food. I did it for us, for our life. You were never supposed to find out. I found out, I said quietly, and I'm done. His voice dropped to a whisper. If I can't have my family, no one will. The line went dead. I sat there shaking. That night, something happened that proved my fear was justified. The power went out. Emergency lights flickered on. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside my room. Too many footsteps. Then, screaming. A gunshot. Chaos exploded. I curled instinctively around my stomach as guards shouted orders. Doors slammed. Someone yelled my name. Mrs. Zanaya, stay down. Smoke filled the corridor. Through the haze, I saw him, Trevante, disguised in security gear, face twisted with rage and desperation. His eyes locked onto mine. For a split second, the world stopped. Then he raised the gun. A body crashed into him from the side. They tumbled out of sight. Another gunshot rang out. I screamed. Minutes felt like hours before the all-clear was called. Trevante was gone. Escaped. 2 guards were injured. 1 was dead. The detective arrived later, face grim. He planned this. The blackout, the fake IDs, everything. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I looked right at me. He's not trying to hide anymore, the detective said. He's escalating. That night, the judge approved an emergency measure. My testimony would be taken immediately, sealed, recorded, and backed up. If something happened to me, the case would continue. As the camera light blinked word, I spoke clearly, steadily. I told the truth about the marriage, the affair, the poison, the lies, the attempted murder. When it was over, I felt lighter and more afraid than ever. Because now Trevante knew he had lost control, and men like him only do one thing next. They burn everything down. As the recording ended and silence returned, one question echoed through my mind. How far would Trevante go when he had nothing left to protect?
The city woke up to chaos. By morning, every major news outlet carried the same headline: CEO escapes custody after deadly safe house attack. My name wasn't mentioned, but I knew I was the shadow behind every word. The detective met me before sunrise. Dark circles ringed his eyes. He's off the grid, he said. No phone, no cards, no known associates. But he'll come for me, I replied. Yes, he said honestly. That's why we're changing strategy. Within hours, I was moved again, this time out of the city, deep into a rural area where roads twisted through forest and silence pressed in from every direction. The safe location wasn't marked on any map. Even the guards didn't know its name. It should have felt like relief. It didn't. That afternoon, my doctor arrived for a checkup. She listened to the baby's heartbeat, steady and strong, and gave me a sad smile. Stress like this isn't ideal, she said gently, but you're doing remarkably well. I nodded, swallowing hard. I don't have a choice. That evening, I sat alone on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, staring into the trees. That's when my phone buzzed. A notification. Not a call, a video. My breath caught. I hit play. The screen showed the front of my old house, the one I had refused to return to. The camera moved slowly, deliberately, as if whoever held it wanted me to feel every step. Then his voice. "Trey always loved this place," Trevant said calmly. "You said it felt like home." The camera panned to the living room, my wedding photo. The frame shattered on the floor. I screamed as the video ended. The detective took the phone from my shaking hands. "He's baiting you. He's showing me he can reach me," I whispered. That night, another message arrived. Coordinates. No words, just a location. The detective shook his head. "It's a trap." "I know," I said, "but it's also a mistake." He frowned. "What do you mean?" I said, "He wants me to come alone. He wants control, which means he's predictable." We made a plan. The next day, I recorded a message, one that would make its way to him. "I'm tired of running," I said into the camera, voice breaking just enough to sound real. "If you want to talk, I'll meet you." The location I named wasn't real, but the reaction was. Within hours, movement lit up the surveillance systems near the coordinates he had sent. Trevant took the bait. Night fell heavy and cold as law enforcement closed in, quietly, patiently. From a secure vehicle miles away, I watched the live feed. An abandoned warehouse, a single figure pacing inside. Trevant. His face looked older, thinner, stripped of power. "Wait," he suddenly said, staring toward the entrance. "Zinea?" Armed officers stormed in. "Police, on the ground." He spun, eyes wild. "She said she'd come." They tackled him before he could reach the door. I exhaled, tears streaming down my face. "It's over," the detective said softly. But it wasn't. As they lifted Trevant to his feet, he looked straight into the camera, straight at me, and smiled, a slow, chilling smile. Then he mouthed 4 words, "You'll never be free." The feed cut out. My knees gave way. Because in that moment, I understood something terrifying. Even behind bars, he still believed he owned me. As the screen went dark and silence filled the vehicle, one fear refused to fade. What would Trevant do next, knowing he'd lost everything except his obsession?
The trial began 3 weeks later. By then, the world knew his name, not as a visionary CEO, not as a respected leader, but as a man accused of poisoning his own wife and killing his unborn child in the process. I walked into the courthouse under heavy guard, cameras flashing like lightning. My hands trembled, but my back stayed straight. I wasn't walking in as his victim anymore. I was walking in as his reckoning. Trevante sat at the defense table in a tailored suit, looking calm, almost bored. When his eyes met mine, his lips curved into a faint smile, like we were still playing some private game only he understood. I refused to look away. The prosecutor laid everything out piece by piece. The financial records, the forged receipts, the alleyway footage, the recordings from Soraya. When she took the stand, her voice shook, but she didn't break. She testified to everything, how Trevante contacted her, how he framed the request as a medical emergency, how he promised protection. Then it was my turn. As I raised my hand to swear the oath, Trevante leaned back in his chair, confident. He still thought he could control me. I told the truth. I spoke about the marriage that turned cold, the sudden affection, the poisoned meal, the blood on the office floor, the threats, the safe house attack. When I revealed I had been pregnant at the time, the courtroom gasped. Trevante's smile finally cracked. His attorney objected repeatedly, but the judge overruled every time. Then came the defense's turn. They painted me as unstable, emotional, jealous. They suggested I had orchestrated everything to destroy a powerful man. That was when the prosecutor played the final recording.
Travante's voice filled the courtroom. "If she has that baby, I lose everything." Silence. Travante stood up abruptly. "That's out of context." The judge banged the gavel. "Sit down." For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. The verdict came after 4 days. Guilty. On all major counts. The sentence was harsh. Decades behind bars. No parole for many years. As he was led away, he twisted around, straining against the guards. "You think this ends here?" he shouted. "I'll always be part of your life." I didn't respond, because his power ended the moment the judge spoke. Weeks later, I sat in a quiet nursery bathed in soft sunlight. The walls were painted pale green. A crib stood near the window. My phone buzzed. A news alert. Former CEO assaulted in a prison fight. Condition critical. I stared at the screen for a long moment. No relief, no joy, only closure. I placed my hand on my belly, feeling a strong, steady kick. "We're safe," I whispered. But deep down, I knew healing wasn't instant. Trauma leaves echoes, and freedom takes time. As I closed my eyes and felt my baby move, a quiet question lingered. Could a future truly be peaceful after surviving a man who tried to erase it? Peace didn't arrive all at once. It crept in slowly, quietly, like sunlight through a cracked door. In the months after the trial, my life transformed in ways I never expected. I resigned from the company board, sold my shares, and severed every remaining tie to the empire Travantin had built on control and fear. The money didn't matter anymore. Freedom did. I moved to a different city, one where no one recognized my face or whispered my name. My new home was modest, filled with warm light and open windows. No security cameras, no armed guards, just air, just choice. Therapy became part of my routine. At first, I barely spoke. Trauma doesn't announce itself. It sits quietly, waiting. But with time, the words came. About the manipulation, the gaslighting, the slow erosion of self. The therapist once asked me, "When did you stop trusting him?" I thought about it for a long time. "Before I knew I needed to," I finally answered. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Each doctor's visit felt like a small victory. Each kick, each heartbeat was a reminder that something good had survived something evil. One afternoon, while sorting old files, I found my wedding ring. I hadn't worn it since the arrest. For a moment, memories surged. Laughter, promises, hope. Then the reality followed. I placed the ring in a small box and mailed it to the prison. No note, no explanation, just an ending. A week later, I received a letter from him. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. I didn't open it right away. I sat on the edge of my bed, breathing slowly, grounding myself the way therapy had taught me. When I finally unfolded the paper, the handwriting was familiar, controlled, careful. He wrote about regret, about betrayal, about how the world had turned against him. He never once said the words, "I'm sorry." At the bottom, one sentence stood alone. "We were supposed to grow old together." I folded the letter back up and placed it in the trash. That night, I slept peacefully. In my final trimester, I started volunteering at a women's support center. Listening to other stories, different details, same patterns, gave my pain meaning. Survival felt less lonely when shared. One woman grabbed my hand after a session and whispered, "How did you get out?" I answered honestly. I stopped believing his version of me. When labor began, it was quiet. No drama, no fear, just strength. After hours of pain and pushing, a cry filled the room, strong, alive, undeniable. They placed my son in my arms. Tears streamed down my face as I studied him. Tiny fingers, determined expression, heartbeat steady against my chest. "You're free," I whispered to him. "And so am I."
But even in that moment of joy, a shadow flickered at the edge of my mind. Because stories like mine don't always end cleanly. And sometimes, the past doesn't stay buried. As my son slept peacefully in my arms, one unsettling thought surfaced. Was this truly the end or just the calm before something else emerged?
The past didn't return with noise. It returned with a whisper. 3 months after my son was born, life had settled into a gentle rhythm. Morning walks, late-night feedings, soft laughter replacing old fear. I had learned how to live without looking over my shoulder. Almost. One afternoon, as I pushed the stroller through a quiet park, my phone vibrated. An alert from the correctional system. Inmate transfer notification. Trevant M. My breath caught. He wasn't being released, but he was being moved. I reminded myself of the facts. Maximum security facility, limited communication, no power. Still, my hands shook. That night, after I put my son to sleep, I sat alone in the living room and finally allowed myself to feel it all. Not fear, not anger, but something else. Release. I no longer belonged to the story he wrote. Days later, a package arrest. No return address. My heart pounded as I opened it. Inside was the wedding ring, the same one I had mailed back, along with a note, written in a different hand. He asked me to send this. He said you'd know what it means. I stared at the ring for a long time. Then I walked to the kitchen, opened the trash, and dropped it inside. Some symbols don't deserve to be reclaimed. Weeks passed. Nothing else came. No letters, no threats, no shadows. One evening, while rocking my son to sleep, I realized something profound. Trevant hadn't disappeared because he was defeated. He disappeared because he was irrelevant. Power only exists where fear feeds it, and I had starved mine. Years later, my son asked me why we lived so far from our old life. I smiled and said, because we chose peace. I never told him the whole story. Some legacies aren't meant to be inherited. As for me, I rebuilt. A new career, new friendships, a quiet confidence that came from surviving something designed to destroy me. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the woman I used to be, the one who sat in an office staring at a bowl of poisoned food, unaware of how close she was to death. I don't mourn her. I thank her because she listened to her instincts, because she chose life, because she didn't eat the meal meant to end her story, and in doing so, she wrote a new one. The end. If today's story touched your heart or kept you hooked, you can show your love by sending a super thanks. Your support helps me continue creating more powerful life stories for you. Thank you, truly, for always being so kind and supportive. I can't wait to read your thoughts about this story. On your screen right now, you'll find 2 new stories that I highly recommend, filled with emotions, twists, and lessons. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe for many more inspiring life stories. Until the next one, sending you love, respect, and gratitude. See you in the next story.